Okay, so we're going to do a little bonus lecture here on working with 3D scan data. So I went to a website called 3D.sk. If you guys should know it if you've taken my class. Lots of cool human references here, but they also have scan data. And this particular head is part of their free pack, their free bundle. If you go to free 3D reference, I believe is where it is. It's kind of their sample, because it's not a free website. It's cheap. I think it's like 20-something bucks a month. What I do is I make an account, download a bunch of stuff, and then I cancel my account. Just whenever I need new references. But this is part of the free bundle, and when you get 3D scan data, you get something like this, really disorganized mesh. If we look at our wireframe, it's just a bunch of triangles. There's no edge flow for the animation, you know? No animation, deformation, edge flow, like rings around the eyes, rings around the mouth, following the muscle structure of the face. So this is pretty terrible. We have to do a lot of cleanup. And look at the back. Obviously they didn't scan the back. They didn't go all the way around because they didn't get a whole lot of detail there. Looks like they took the picture from here to here, which is fine because that's what we're here for. If it made perfect animation meshes, we wouldn't need 3D modelers, so be glad that it gives you a messy mesh. The other thing it does is it does capture the texture of the face, but it looks like this. Because, you know, obviously it doesn't know how to UV map. The computer doesn't know how you want to UV map it, so it's just every pixel is almost laid out kind of in order, just like that. And so we have to do some cleanup to organize the texture too. And this is something that's becoming more and more common in games, and especially in movies. If you're working in a movie and they need to make a 3D double of Robert Downey Jr., they're going to scan his face, and you have to clean it up. Another thing that's common is doing 3D scans for blend shapes. That's what this one is right here, actually. This is just that's why she's making a face. So they scan the face with a neutral pose, and then they scan like every different facial expression, and then the computer can make the model make all those facial expressions based on these scans. But you have to clean up each one. And that's a common thing. I knew somebody who did that at Sony. All he did was clean up these scans, exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to use Zbrush to do it, only because it's quick and easy. But those of you who have taken my class know that there are better programs to do retopology in, like Maya. You can do it in Maya using the quad draw, or even a dedicated program like TopoGun. But we're just going to do it quick and dirty really quick in Zbrush here, just for the sake of time. Okay, first things first is I want to get the texture on here too. So I'm going to go to a white material. I like this skin material right here. And I'm going to go to Texture, Import. I'll just grab it. And by default it doesn't go onto the model, it's just kind of in our texture library up here. To get it onto the model, I'm going to come over here to my texture map, and I'll click right here, and I'll select it. Now, ZBrush, you know, it's kind of quirky. It's upside down. That's why the texture doesn't line up. So we got to flip the texture. I forgot to do that. So I'm going to click on the texture here, flip vertical, and then I'll just reapply it. There we go. And you can see it lines up really well. That's because this thing has terrible UVs. Alright. So I'm going to be messing this thing up, basically. When I turn on Dynamesh, the UVs are going to go away, so that means the texture won't line up anymore. So I'm going to make a copy of this to preserve the way it looks with the texture on it. So I'm going to come over here to Subtool, and I'll duplicate. And I'll just turn off the one I duplicated. If you want to be organized, it's probably a good idea. You can name this. So I'll call this, rename it, what's her name, Elena? Elena Scan. So I know that's the messy scanned one. And I'll turn that off. Cool. So now I have the eyeball off for the scan one, and I just have this one. So for the one I'm working on, I don't need the texture anymore. So I'm going to go down to Textures, and I'll turn that off. Okay. I'll choose a material that I can actually see. There we go. All right, let's convert this thing to Dynamesh so we can actually work with it. Now, first thing that's going to do is close up some holes. Notice that the bottom of this is open, and there's also like weird little tiny faces just kind of floating off the surface, and hopefully those will disappear. So that's the first step, is converting to Dynamesh. So I'll come over here to Geometry, Dynamesh. Now I don't want to keep the resolution low. In this case, I'm going to jump all the way up to like, let's try 512. That's because I don't want to lose all the detail that's in her face. If I set it to 128, she's going to be really blocky. So I'll convert to Dynamesh. This might take a minute or two. So you'll see the progress bar up here. Make sure you don't click on anything while that's going. Actually, that was quick. All right. We reduced our polygon count by quite a lot, but that's okay. So now here's our new mesh. Still not animation quality, but it's better. There's actually some quads in here, and we can see what's going on. If I update my Dynamesh by doing that control drag on the canvas, holding down control, dragging a box, it's hopefully going to get rid of some of these little straggler faces, and it didn't. So what that means is I have to shrink them by holding down shift for smooth and just smoothing them until they shrink. And if they're small enough, next time I update Dynamesh, they'll disappear. So any weird little faces or little spikes just sticking out in space like this, just go ahead and smooth them down. My computer's a little laggy because I'm recording video. There we go. Get rid of all this hair. We don't need this hair right here. Computer is so laggy. And don't worry about losing too much detail in the skin, because we're going to project that all back from the high-res scan. We can get rid of any weird bumps too, like these eyebrows. We don't need them. This looks like a mole right here, so I'll probably keep that, but some of these are mistakes, like these little really sharp spikes. Those are just artifacts in the scan, so I'll get rid of them. Not worrying again, I'm not worrying about the pores. The pores will come back when I need them to. And sometimes you might get things like this. See this hole in her ear? That's just, again, an artifact. I'm sure she doesn't really have a hole that big in her ear. I mean, some people do, but usually not right there. So the way we're going to fix that is I'm going to use the inflate. I for inflate. I'll just inflate that area until it closes up. And that way when I update my Dynamesh, maybe I'll even use clay buildup. That way when I use my Dynamesh, that'll become solid. So I'll just update my mesh. And hopefully that hole will fill in and all the weird little spikies will go away. There's a couple little extra faces that didn't go away. Oh, I didn't even notice these ones up here. You can also try deflating the little stragglers. Sometimes that helps them disappear. So I'm using the inflate and it didn't work. Never mind. Yeah, never mind. Inflate does not work. Makes it a lot worse. Cool. I'll just smooth the back of the head. Now, don't worry, 3D scans aren't going to eliminate your job as a 3D sculptor, because you can see this is still kind of messy looking, and you still have to be good at sculpting skin, because you're going to have to do a lot of cleanup and making it look good in the areas where it doesn't look good. Alright, that's alright. We can work with that. Let me update my mesh one more time. Well, get rid of any last little stragglers. So just control drag on the canvas. Cool. Good enough. Alright, let's do a really quick retopology. So to do that, I'm just going to grab my Z remesher guides. And I want to trace roughly the edge flow that I want. Oh man, there's still some stragglers here. Let me update one more time here. If you still have stragglers at the end of this, you can erase them in Maya. When you export to Maya, just delete any little faces you don't want. Anyway, I'm on ZBrush guides, and I'm just gonna roughly trace the edge flow that I want. This video is assuming that you know something about good edge flow for a face. But I want these rings emanating from the eyes. The eyes are closed here. Depending on the project and exactly what you're doing, you may be expected to like sculpt the eyes open. Just resculpt them. But in this case, we're just going to assume it's part of the facial expression they were trying to capture, so I'm not going to open the eyes. Yeah, I'll just do this. Oop, didn't quite make it there. Alright, yeah, let's do a little bit around the nose. I'm not using symmetry because obviously she's not making a symmetrical facial expression. I'm being really, really rough. Just going really quick. Oh, I did that wrong, didn't I? Okay, that'll be good, just for now. Alright. Retopology. So I'm going to come down here to Z Remesher in the geometry palette. And let's just hit Z Remesher and see how good it does with default settings. It's going to take a little bit. The target polygon count is going to be 5,000, as you can see right here. That's what this little 5 means. But I have a feeling it's going to be higher. It always is. Taking a minute or two. There we go. That's looking okay for now. This was a real project. I'd take some more time to clean this area up, make the mouth look good. But for our purposes, just getting the concept down, this is okay. Alright. Now we have to UV map this thing, but what I like to do whenever I do the Z Remesher is I like to export this thing as an OBJ and then just re-import it right away, because for some reason, theoretically you can just work on this, but I found that it kind of has history and it sort of knows it came from a really high-res Dynamesh mesh, and when you press divide, you lose your lowest subdivision for some reason, this really low one, which I want to keep. So I'm not sure what's going on there. So what I like to do is just export this as an OBJ. Then I'll call it Elena clean. No UVs, so I know it's not done. And then let me turn off edit mode, go to my simple brush, and I'm going to import that OBJ I just exported, and I'm going to append it to my tool that I'm working on. So that's this one. You can see this is my main one because it has 2 subtools. So I'll just draw that on the canvas. And yep, so here's my clean, no UV, retopoed mesh. Here's my scan. I'm going to come down here to append and grab the OBJ I just imported. Elena clean, no UV, right there. And then this is the one that I just retopoed. I'm going to delete it. Cool. So now I just have the scan data, the Elena scan right there. And then I also have the clean, no UVs. Now let me UV map that thing, that's important. I recommend UV mapping in Maya or something like that. But again, for the sake of time, I'm going to UV map in Zbrush. And some of you may not have seen how it's done. It's cool. It's a lot like Retopo in Zbrush, where it's quick and dirty, but you don't have any control of where all the edges are. So it's not the ideal thing. I don't like to UV map in Zbrush, but again, just for the sake of time and just because you students here probably haven't seen it yet, I'll UV map in Zbrush. So what I'm going to do is come down here. I'll choose a white material. And I'm going to go to Z plugin, UV master. And I could just, it could just be one button. I could just hit unwrap all. But I want to have a little bit of say where the edges go. So I'm going to turn on enable control painting. And then I'm going to click on protect. And you notice my brush changes to RGB for painting. Oh, should be RGB for painting. Check my texture. You should make sure you're under standard brush before you do that. So I'm on RGB for painting, and it's set to red. Anywhere I paint red, it's not going to put a seam there. It's not going to cut the mesh there. So I'll put that all over the face. I don't want any seams here in the face. I'll include the ears. So red for protect. No seams go here. And then if I come back up to Z plugin, I'm going to go to attract, and I'm going to say, how about put some seams somewhere over here where I don't care. So you don't know exactly where it's going to cut it. You don't really have that much control, but you can attract it to that area. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Z plugin, and I'm going to press unwrap all. But before I do that, I'm going to pause the video because it's going to take a while. So after I pause the video, that's all I'm going to do is just press this button right here. So I'll be right back. That actually wasn't too long. So it should have UVs now, and the way I test it is I come down here to UV map. I'll click morph UVs under UV map, and it lays it out flat. You can see how it's cut. Very random. This is why I don't like it. But her face is in here somewhere, and we'll see that once we put the texture on. Okay. So now it's just a matter of projecting that texture on there. From the subtool, from the high-res one. So let's go up to the scan subtool. I'm going to turn off the one that I'm, the clean, actually I should rename this because right now it says clean no UVs. I just UV mapped it. What the hell was that noise? That was crazy. Someone spray painting? Alright, so now it's clean UVs. Cool. So I'm on the scan data. This is the messy one. And what's going on right now is I have a texture map. It's right here, and you can see it looks like this. It's really messy. What I want to do is bake this texture onto the poly paint. So there's kind of three layers of color on your model, and the bottom one, if you have no poly paint or texture, it's just the whatever color you choose here. And you see my model's changing color. If I were to poly paint on it, then this wouldn't affect it because the poly paint goes above this solid color. Does that make sense? And then above that is the texture. So if I did like paint like just crazy designs like pink swirls or whatever I want on the skin, and then I would turn on this texture map would be on top and it would cover up the poly paint. What I want to do is bake this down into the poly paint layer so it becomes part of the mesh itself. And it's really easy to do. I'm just going to turn the texture on, and then I'll come here to poly paint and go poly paint from texture. And it's done. So now if I go to texture map and turn that off, my color all stays there because now it's baked right into the mesh itself. The reason I did that is because when I project the details from this high-res mesh onto my low-res cleaned up mesh, I want it to bring the color with it. And it can only do that if it's poly paint. So first things first, I want to make sure that my low-res mesh has enough subdivisions to take all this detail. And my high-res scan is 1.25 million faces. So my low-res one is only 13,000, so I got to divide that. I'm going to come over here to geometry, give it some subdivisions. We're not messing with Dynamesh anymore. Now we're doing real subdivisions. And 55,000, I'm watching this number right here climb. 204,000, 800,000, 302,000, or 3,200,000. Perfect. So as long as it's higher, it's fine. And it can be a lot higher if you want, because you're going to be sculpting your own little pores and wrinkles. Anyway, I'm going to come here to subtool, and I want to make sure that both of the eyeballs are turned on. But the actual active subtool is the one that has no texture yet, the clean UVs, because that's the one that's going to receive all the detail. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here in my subtool palette to project, and when you hit project all, it's going to take all the detail, like the physical detail, but also the color. So I'm going to pause the video, and then I'm just going to hit project all. I'll be right back. And it looks like we're done. If I come over here, I can turn off the scan layer. And here's our nice organized mesh. Still a little bit of cleanup to do, but look how organized the mesh is now. It roughly follows a nice organized deformation mesh. Those of you who know about modeling faces know there's probably some mistakes in here, but like I said, this was just quickly done to get the concepts down. From this point, it's up to you as the artist to now apply your sculpting skills to make it look better. So let's go over a clay, or I'm not going to do the whole face. I'm just going to do a little bit. So I'm going to grab my clay buildup, and for sculpting, I'm going to come down here to Poly Paint and just turn off Colorize so I can just see the mesh itself. And I can see, all right, I got some pixelization, so let's go in and smooth. Oh, I got my Z add on. Colorize. Oh man, my smooth was set to painting. It's my bad. There we go. So yeah, so you can get rid of any of these weird artifacts, and you're gonna have to repaint all the pores and wrinkles yourself, so it doesn't really preserve that well. So I'll just do this section of the forehead really quick. I won't do the whole face. There are ways to project detail from the color map into the physical bump information, the height information of the face. It's a little bit beyond the scope of this video, but you're not just totally left hanging. You can use the image itself to project that detail. So any skills you want to employ to get these skin pores back in here, that's up to you. I'm going to use my standard brush set to spray with alpha number 40. And you can go in and add these pores back in, get nice sharp detail. Add some bumps maybe. Oops, now she's got elephant skin. A little bit too crazy. But yeah, you guys should know about fine detailing if you've taken the class. Also, don't be afraid if you want to accent any creases that have disappeared. Maybe using your damp standard. I can see that some of these, that's too intense. Some of these forehead wrinkles seem to have disappeared, so you can go and kind of bring them back using damp standard. Yeah, now it's back to just pure sculpting as an artist. So yeah. Also, I forgot to show you. Let me show you what the texture map looks like. So if I come down here to turn my poly paint back on, and let's say I want to export this texture now. You know, I'm ready to go into Maya because she's all cleaned up and perfect, and I'm really proud of her. I'm going to go to texture map. First, I'll make sure my map is big enough. Under UV map 4K. Now I'll go to texture map and I'll go create from poly paint. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. It doesn't. And here's my slightly more organized texture, which I can export to Maya. So I will export this. Elena color. And there she is. So I was able to take all that disorganized mess and put this in a slightly more organized configuration. Obviously, if you want to look a little bit even more organized, you would UV map in Maya, somewhere where you have more control. But at least it makes sense now. And you can go in and fix it by hand, any of these white spots that looks like the scan missed, like behind the ear. Sometimes the 3D scanner doesn't catch all those little nooks and crannies, so you have to go in and just clone stamp and fix all that stuff. So that's a really, really rough breakdown of the process. Obviously, doing ahead would probably take you a few hours to get it done right, but just to get the idea of the concept, hopefully that helps you out. I recommend if you want to go into video games and movies, you go to 3DSK, make an account. I mean, it's helpful, but if you don't want to pay for it, then just go to the free 3D references, and I believe she's in there. They do have some free 3D heads, whether it's hers or not. Yep. or you can just search for other scan data. Alright, so I'll render out this video for you guys, and I'll put it up on the server.